Faster Settlement by Cece Northup and Elizabeth McQuarrie, both of whom are here. Are you guys ready?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
Hi, Simeon. Should I share our screen from here?
Or... Yes, please go ahead and share your slides. Yep.
All right, Cece's going to kick us off and I'll share the screen.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone. So I know a number of folks on the line, but just to introduce myself and Elizabeth, my name is Cece Northup. I'm a Senior Engagement Manager with Glenbrook Partners. Glenbrook Partners is a payment strategy consulting firm. We do a lot of work in financial inclusion and payment strategy in emerging markets. Elizabeth, may I ask you to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, hi everybody, it's great to be in touch again. I'm Elizabeth McQuarrie, one of the partners at Glenbrook, and I participated in this research, but Cece and I owe a great debt here to Carol Coy Benson, who recently retired from Glenbrook, but this was one of her last contributions to this work. And this is also part of a larger deck. If anyone is really into the topic and wants more detail, I think we have more to share. We wanted to really just bring out the core part today. All right, back to you.
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, Elizabeth. Today we're going to talk about settlement, and specifically we're going to talk about interinstitutional settlement, which is, as many of you know, a key component of interoperable payment systems. The goals of these settlement systems is to provide a mechanism for institutions to settle their obligations with two specific common goals in mind, often to decrease risk and to decrease cost. Secondarily, we find that operational efficiency is also often a goal, albeit it tends to be a secondary goal to cost and risk when we think about interinstitutional settlement. So today we'll walk through, as Elizabeth mentioned, this is an extract of a much larger report. Today we're going to walk through kind of the scope and definition of interinstitutional settlement. We'll point out the current preferred model that we're seeing in market. We'll tee up some key categories, concepts and variables of settlement models, and then end with an aspirational approach, recognizing the level 1 project principles and the goals of financial inclusion. So next slide, please.
Okay.
So just some grounding here about what we mean by interinstitutional settlement. We distinguish interinstitutional settlement from end user settlement, often with the goals of financial inclusion in mind. And when we think about real-time retail payment systems, we talk about immediate funds availability. That is to the payer and the payee. That is really acknowledging what's denoted here as end user settlement. That's distinct from the focus of today's conversation, which is the settlement between two DFSPs in a real-time retail payment system. Before we switch gears to the current preferred settlement model, we wanted to acknowledge that current institutional models are routed in historic bank-centric practices. So as more countries expand the set of types of institutions that can serve as DFSPs beyond just banks, including non-bank entities, e-money issuers, it continues to be necessary and critical to adjust the historic models that these institutional settlement approaches stem from it's okay, to operate in a low risk, low cost environment while expanding who can play a meaningful role. So next slide, please. Unless, Elizabeth, you have anything to add?
Nope, and I'll try to control my pushing of the slides here.
No problem. So when we think about the when we think about the obligations of settlement between two DFSPs, right? This interinstitutional settlement. The preferred model we're seeing in market is what's called multilateral deferred net settlement. So that's a bundling of a couple different terms here. So let's unpack that for a second. Multilateral, and again, you can see the definitions here on the left, is distinct from bilateral. So multilateral is acknowledging that obligations between the two DFSPs are calculated across all participating DFSPs and institutions. So it's not, let's say if Elizabeth and myself use a different DFSP, those transactions aren't settled or acknowledged on a bilateral basis, but rather all of the institutions collectively involved in all of the transactions over the period of the settlement window. The obligations are netted across the collective set of DFSPs who participate. So I use this other word net, which just means that the settlement obligations are calculated over the settlement window and not on a individual transaction basis. The last key term here is deferred. This is opposed to real-time settlement. So an RTGS system, as an example, real-time gross settlement, settles transactions, every transaction, in the same period of time in which those transactions are cleared or the end user settlement obligations are fulfilled. Deferred net settlement acknowledges that instead, the settlement obligations are calculated and the settlement window may be longer than a single transaction. So a settlement window from the level 1 project principles should be no more than same day. Often we see in market, payment systems are putting in deferred net settlement models that have settlement windows of anywhere between 2 seconds and multiple hours. So this notion of deferred can take on many forms, and Elizabeth will detail this out a little bit more in a couple slides. To acknowledge some of the players in this diagram and who are involved in multilateral deferred net settlement, we of course see the settlement bank. Oftentimes this is a central bank in country. This is the institution that holds the settlement accounts of the DFSPs who are direct participants in a system or a scheme. Oftentimes we find that the settlement bank has rules and perhaps regulations that dictate how settlement may take place if you are using them as a settlement bank. When payment systems are coming up with their approaches to settlement, they are bound by those rules. So we often find a tight interlinking between the expectations of the settlement bank that's selected and the model that's chosen by the system. That model is articulated by the scheme and the rules of the scheme. So here we see a distinction between the scheme and the platform. That's to acknowledge that oftentimes the organization that writes the rules that bounds the DFSPs to the settlement model is different than the platform or the technology that actually executes those rules and facilitates the true settlement, interinstitutional settlement. So a system is made up of the scheme, which writes the rules that the participants are bound to, as well as the technology, the platform that actually manifests those rules. Elizabeth, anything else to add to this slide?
Perhaps just noting that each of those participants or entities on the right side have different can manage the settlement process differently, in the sense that each of them have a role to play, decisions to make, that informs how the whole process works. And I think maybe that's the right transition to the next slide.
While you transition, I just want to also add that, today we introduced the most preferred model we see in market, which is this multi-deferred net settlement model. There are other models. Again, those are well articulated in this fuller document if you're interested. And that also kind of further unveils why this model is more preferred or more common, if you will, in market relative to the others. So just let us know if that's something folks are interested in seeing, and we can share that out.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had all of those participants that we saw, and let's just sort of put them into a generic settlement flow in multilateral deferred net settlement. And each of them, again, can have different sort of decisions which determine the outcome. But one of those first key decisions is, how many settlement windows are we going to have? Is it just going to be end of day, whatever that is arbitrarily determined to be in a 24/7, 365 process? Or are there going to be multiple settlement windows throughout the day that sort of true up balances, net balances with each other, and then also will affect the liquidity availability? So those are choices that are made. Each of them have different implications. And then, of course, there's a ledger where the sending and receiving participants have their transactions recorded. So that's our balance sheet, if you will, among all the participants. And the platform is going to look to a participant ledger in a way when there's a transaction that comes through to decide whether or not there's sufficient funds in that ledger to approve the next transaction that comes through. So, of course, when these are relatively small value transactions, the risk is relatively low. But if you're talking about larger value transactions, you can imagine that even a single transaction could have a risk parameter here. So when they look to settle see if there's funds in the account, that is also tapping into a debit or net debit cap value. That's a tongue twister this morning for me. So that is a calculation that the system makes, could be informed by the scheme, could be informed by the central bank and what it says about the creditworthiness, collateral aspects of each of the participants, their reserves, if they're a chartered financial institution, such as a bank or microfinance institution. So to see how much sort of liquidity they should have in any different period throughout the day. And then when those transactions go through, obviously it needs to be finalized in a settlement bank account. And typically those accounts are all at the same institution, often at the central bank, though not necessarily. That's a scheme system choice in many ways. But here's where things start to get more complicated, because if you're not a chartered financial institution, you're not likely to have a formal reserve account or settlement account at a central bank. So that's where the trust accounts or a sponsoring settlement institution starts to come into play for our e-money issuers and mobile money operators. But we obviously have some place where these accounts transactions are settled. And so the entries, when they're finalized, get balanced out in that account. So we're debiting the sending institution and crediting the receiving institution on behalf of the end parties. And then I also want to just talk about how this can present opportunities for risk that we want to certainly design our schemes around the mitigation of those risks. So for the final two items that we want to talk about, I'm going to actually use a diagram here that, you know, we have a settlement window, which is either, could be the whole day. Again, it could be from, you know, 12 noon until 1500, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It could be multiple of these throughout the day. This is a, you know, a scheme choice effectively to be managed. But as we talked about earlier, that when we approve that transaction, to know that there were funds in the account, that transaction really hadn't been fully executed yet. We know there's money in the account, that the sending institution is good for those funds, but depending on the length of the window, by the time the settlement actually occurs, there could be a sort of a credit debit mismatch. And these are risks that would build up throughout the system. So CC noted that even if it's, you know, real time, you know, is that 2 seconds? Is that 15 seconds? Is that 3 hours or a 24-hour period? So when the posting actually goes to occur and the sending institution is, you know, fully, finally, and irrevocably debited in order to affect that transaction, you know, depending on how these settlement accounts are actually utilized, there could be risk there. And some of the potential ways that risk can enter is, you know, not only just the ebbs and flows of credits and debits in and out of a single account, but banks, you know, because they typically participate in multiple payment systems, they may have credits and debits going in and out on behalf of, you know, an RTGS system, potentially an ACH, or any other payment system that where settlement is affected in those accounts. So even when this is a pre-funded environment, the transactions are fully pre-funded, we might end up with this sort of mismatch risk environment. So finally, just to close out with some of the ideas around ways that we can mitigate these risks. At the beginning, you know, CC talked about the objectives of settlement and payment system. Obviously, we want to minimize risk. We want to maximize the cost of liquidity to the financial participants so that it doesn't, you know, translate to additional costs to the end users. And obviously, we want operational efficiency. So these, you know, can sometimes, you know, rub against each other, right? If you want to fully minimize settlement risk, you're not going to be maximizing liquidity, or at least you're not going to maximize it fully, because to do that, you would have not only, you know, what funds you think should be in an institution's net debit cap during any sort of, you know, settlement window, but you would have a big buffer, right? Because, you know, this is not entirely predictable what the end parties will, you know, send and receive from each other. So to just sort of look at some of the mitigations one by one. For minimizing settlement risk, you really want to use a dedicated account, right, for this payment system, our real-time retail payment system, which might mean that there might be multiple settlement accounts at the settlement institutions. So, you know, that's a small layer of complexity, but it minimizes the settlement risk. And when you talk about liquidity costs, you know, you want to create as much predictability in the system as possible. So if there's going to be, you know, ebbs and flows, maybe setting multiple windows throughout the day, as opposed to just an end of day settlement window would allow the participants to settle up with each other throughout the day, refund that account if necessary, and therefore minimize the cost of keeping full or excess liquidity in the account all day. And the greater extent of automation here for the calculating the net debit cap can also be a liquidity minimizing tool, because if you don't have to do anything on a manual basis, or you have some artificial intelligence in that to sort of pattern the flows and anticipate the needed balances over time, you can minimize the liquidity needs. And obviously you want this settlement account to be updated on a 24/7, 365 basis, just like the payment system is. And that can also sometimes be a challenge, because even in advanced economies and payment systems like Europe, we had to wait a period of time before the new real-time payment system there had, if you will, weekend settlement capabilities, because the settlement institutions weren't open on the weekends previously. So lots of adjustments. And here, talking about operational efficiency, and then I think we'll have some time for questions that we want to. I think one way to have more efficiency is to ensure that all participants are on an equal basis, not just the chartered financial institutions in the traditional way, but also e-money issuers, and depending on how you count it, microfinance institutions, or as well other e-money issuers. You want them all to be direct participants in this settlement system, so that you don't have opportunity for imbalances or needing to recalculate. Clearly, pre-funding can also be an inefficiency, because you're not going to run out of funds and then have emergency situations that need to be recalculated. And this really requires, this efficiency requires a lot of automation and a dynamic ledger, which always knows throughout the day what a DFSP's settlement position is. And we would want to make, insight into those positions available through some sort of administrative portal, both to all the participants, whether they're direct or indirect, because even if an indirect participant is settling through a direct participant, and again, these players and actors can have different names in different systems, but even if you're not settling directly at the central bank, for example, you're still responsible for the money that needs to settle for your end users. So you really need direct insight into what the balances are in those accounts. So I think just to give our email addresses here, if you want to follow up and get the fuller report, or if we want to do some, if there's any Q&A at this point.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Cece. I don't see any questions on the chat, but there is a link there to Discourse. If you have any questions for Cece and Elizabeth, you can post them there, and we'll make sure that they're followed through.
So Simeon, I think this means we are operationally efficient, and we're closing out our settlement window in a positive balance.
Yes, you have, with 15 minutes to spare. Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Cece.
Net liquidity for everyone. Time.
Excellent. I'm going to close out. This last session brings us to the end of our day.